I can't completely explain this to you in one sitting like this. However, I can give you a small example. Okay? It will help you, food for thought to work it out. Also, when you find out your solution, it will be yours. If I give you, it will be mine. But I will give you a hint, a follow-up. You follow up. Every morning, we see the sunrise. Evening, we see the sun set. True. But if you ask even a school child, the school child will tell you that the sun neither rises nor sets. It is the earth that is going round. But what do we see with our senses, with our eyes? Our eyes are the most prominent part of our indriyas. Much of our choices are made by looking. Not like dogs, they do by smelling. Eyes. With eyes we see, we like somebody, we don't like somebody, we see like this color, we don't like. It's the eye that first sees. It's our most important indriya, sense organ. And that says that the sun is rising and the sun is setting. But we know that the sun is neither rising nor setting. Now that means the sense organs can easily take us for a ride. That ride is called Maya. Not as if nothing exists. Everything exists. It may not be existing as I think it exists. Maybe something else altogether. Imagine you're looking at me, you can see me like this. What if a fly is looking at me? Because a fly has compound eyes, many small eyes. It may be seeing me as completely different. So what is my real? I don't know. This is called Maya. Okay? And having understood this, seeking what is permanent, if there is anything permanent, behind this constantly shifting scenario is the reality, if one finds it. So therefore Adi Shankaracharya said, to find that, first you have to say not this, not this, not this, till you touch there. When you touch there, you can't say it is this or that or anything of the kind, because it cannot be defined by our puny little brains. It's something else. Roughly. So this is food for thought. Think about it. It's not that I don't have disciples, but I don't count them. And when I say disciples, that doesn't mean that somebody is laughing there. He thinks, oh, now I know I'm his disciple or something. When I say disciple, what I mean is, it's nowadays so easily everybody becomes disciples. Unfortunately, nowadays there are more gurus than disciples. That's a different story. But somebody went to a guru, I believe, and said, sir, I want to become your disciple. He said, okay. So what am I supposed to do? He said, you have to get up at 4 in the morning, 3:30, Brahma Muhurta. Oh, this guy said 3:30, okay. And then you have to wash my kutir, and then have a dip in the Ganga in the cold, and then bring firewood for the dhuni. Okay, and he's wondering when is breakfast coming. So then I have to you have 2 hours of Upanishads teaching. Okay. After that we have chanting for an hour. Okay? And then you have a small break, you can eat something. He said, okay. And then he thought after that you can have a nap. No. After that you have to study the Brahma Sutras. So this guy thought for a while and he said, sir, what does it take to become a guru? This is too much. He said, to become a guru, you sit and put your hands up and bless. He said, please make me a guru. So, you know what it means. So, that's why I'm very careful about using the term disciple. It's not that there isn't. There are some people. But I am very careful about using the term disciple, because then it becomes a little too exclusive. And I would rather prefer somebody who understands what I am saying and leads a spiritual life, rather than always coming and pulling my legs. You understand what I mean? So this is why I don't overtly use the term disciple, but I would rather say that to start with, it's good to be good friends. True friends. Okay? And then slowly one realizes, maybe I am being guided. Then you should keep quiet. You shouldn't go about saying, I am the first disciple. And so on. That's why. It's not as if there is no such. There is, but there is no official number.
You just mentioned that everybody is in a spiritual journey. Difference is the direction. How, I know it's a long journey to shift it. How would that shift occur towards the inside? Like
towards the inside.
Mm-hmm. That is first question.
Okay.
The second question is, we hear a lot of things about the mantra and the devata. What is the significance? And the significance of home?
Homa.
Home.
Home is home. Okay. This is the last question, because I think by the time I finish. The first question was, say that again.
How do we change the direction inward?
Inward, yes. Now the first thing is, you have to first theoretically accept the fact that you need to turn inward. This has to be first theoretically accepted, that you can't find it outside, you need to find it inside. So once you have decided on that, then you need to know how to turn within, which means first this has to be clear. Otherwise nobody wants to turn within. Once you have decided on that, then what you said in the second question and third question, there are many ways by which the mind can be carefully diverted and brought within. Okay. Now, when you go to a temple, say Devata, Arati is done. Now, when Arati is being done, when the light is being shown, when the bell is being rung, people go there and stand with their eyes closed. I always tell them, listen, it's being done for you to keep your eyes open and see. You can close your eyes and sit at home. Why are you here? So when this is done, it means they are showing you that divinity is being represented here as a Devata, and we are showing you that it is here. Okay, so that is the external. Now the next step is, when it is over, go and sit in a corner of a temple. You know this, that it's always been said traditionally, after you do your pradakshina, sit somewhere quietly. Sit somewhere. Then, that is the time to close your eyes and bring the Devata which is there into your heart. I'll tell you why. Because it's not easy for most people to turn their mind within into something that is nothing, or something which cannot be defined. So some definitions are required. Devatas have been imbued with energy to bring about each person's mind according to their Devata. Everybody may not like Shiva, everybody may not like Vishnu, everybody may not like Devi. So it depends on a person's. There are some people who don't want any of these, that's fine. No problem here. But you can't say the other guy is wrong. So that may be that person's orientation. So then slowly from the outside you bring it inside. Now, so many people are, I'm sure, aware that there is something called a Sri Yantra or a Sri Chakra. Intricate design, beautifully drawn. It's not easy for the mind to go within. Most people it's not possible. So what do? You do the external worship of it. Now when you have an yantra, it's halfway between actual form, rupa, and nirupa, between. So it's a graduation from form to that which has no human form, but which is still a form. It's a gradual ascent. Then you go there. Now what is in the center of a Sri Yantra? I'm just giving an example to clarify what you're trying to discuss. A bindu. What is a bindu? A center point. Where is the center point? When you take that after that and transfer it inside. The center point is the core of your heart. And the Devata is there. Okay, now why do we do homas? There are various reasons why homas are done. One is that it is an offering. Offering where? Offering into the fire. Fire of what? Fire of discrimination that burns down one's ignorance. Now you can't say, I'm doing the homa inside. It doesn't work. So you do something outside. Also when you light a fire, that's why the Naths have a dhuni, and you sit and meditate on the fire, you're closer to meditating on the inner fire. But the next step in Nath meditation is to transfer that fire into your napi. These are not things, since you asked me, I'm saying, we are now going into practicalities which have to be taught separately. In the Nabhi is where it's called the center of energy. What somebody said? Manipura. Manipura. I was about to say Kundalini Chakra, I got worried and stopped. Because now it's being sold. So in the Manipura, you bring the fire of the homa in, but first you do it outside. Also when you do it, the attitude should be that you are sacrificing something. Even the whole world is, in the Puranas, supposed to have been created by the sacrifice of Brihaspati. Okay. Now in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a beautiful description of homa, a sacrifice. Beautiful. And it's the highest definition of a homa you can find in any sacred scripture. It says, Brahma Arpanam. You can understand. Brahma Havir, Brahma Agno, Brahmana Hutam, Brahmaiva Tena Gandhavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. That everything is the supreme Brahman, reality. The fire, the offering, the hutam, the one who does it, and the act of homa, they are all part of that supreme reality. So ultimately, if you keep this in mind and do a homa, then you are hitting the nail exactly where you should. Otherwise, it will turn into a completely superficial exercise. So I won't say you shouldn't do it, because most human beings need something. They need. Through that only you can go. You can't simply say, oh, I am the Brahman. Can you stand before a running train? I am the Brahman. Not possible. So, thank you very much. Now. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.